Hey, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us on the second day of our private company summer symposium. My name is Rahul Rakit. I'm a research analyst here at LifeSci Capital. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Zach Henderson, Chief Commercial Officer of Glooko, a commercial stage digital health company with a comprehensive SaaS-based diabetes management platform. During the session, Zach and I will dive into Glooko's story and discuss the clinical utility of its platform, as well as the breadth of commercial opportunities that Glooko is pursuing. As I've mentioned a couple of times, before we jump in, I'd like to remind everyone that, you can submit any questions you may have through the Q&A function. Obviously, we'll try to address as many of the questions as time permits. But while we wait for those questions to come in, Zach, maybe you can kick it off by telling us a little bit about yourself, about Glooko, and, about the platform that you guys have developed and are now commercializing.
Sounds good. Thanks, Raul. Nice to be on with everyone today. Thanks for taking the time. As Raul said, I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Glooko. I've been on board for about a year and a half, started right before the global pandemic, which made things quite interesting to get up to speed. But as I think you'll see, it's actually played well into our commercial business opportunities. And we've kind of leaned into the pandemic, given that we are a connected care platform, a remote patient monitoring platform. And so what I'd like to share today is our story around where Glooko's been, where it's going, and then answer all the questions that the group may have. So I have a very brief intro presentation just to level set with everyone. I certainly don't want to PowerPoint everyone to death. But I think it's important to have the background. To kick us off, I'd share with you that Glooko is the world's largest connected care platform. You see our geographic footprint across North America, Europe, even into Asia Pacific and the Middle East. And we're pushing even further into Eastern Europe and have plans for Latin America and Asia Pacific further. So a lot of opportunity for chronic conditions around the world, and Glooko is already in 28 countries. So as Raul mentioned, we got our start around 10 years ago in the area of diabetes. And until fairly recently, we were still in predominantly diabetes. Since then, we've actually been expanding into comorbid conditions like obesity and hypertension. And so on the left side of this view, you kind of see all the overlapping comorbidities with diabetes. And our goal, and part of our Series D fundraising that was closed earlier this year, is to make a more aggressive push into these other comorbid conditions by integrating additional devices, creating different analytic tools, different digital therapeutics in all of these areas. What's interesting, if you do the overlap of the actual patients, it's around the percentage of 90% of persons with diabetes actually have a cardiovascular hypertension or obesity diagnosis as well. So there's a lot of reasons that we're moving into these other conditions, because then we can treat the entire cardiometabolic situation. We're also attempting to address the growing HCP gap towards care. And our whole philosophy and mantra is to enable and connect the physician to patient connection, enhance that, drive it, help it gain more. We're not at all interested in disintermediating that connection, like some solutions in the space. And as I mentioned, the shift from in-clinic care to remote care has significantly accelerated because of COVID-19. And we're seeing that in our global usage statistics. So what is Glooko? For those of you who aren't as familiar, it's a certified medical device. The base platform is categorized as a Class 1 medical device around the world. We do have some Class 2 analytics and digital therapeutics as well. And as I said, it mobilizes that patient to doctor connection by integrating with 95% of available devices. So we're device agnostic is our approach. We don't provide a proprietary device. And that's important because when you're going into an endocrinology clinic or a cardiology clinic, there are hundreds of different devices that the different patients may use. Our solution is trying to cater for that broad range. So because of that, we have hardware, which you can see there. It's not that we want to be in the hardware business, but it helps to be able to collect all the data. We have an app for the iPhone or the Android. And then we have the web-based solution where all of the data that is synchronized goes into that core. We've served almost 3 million people since our inception, with about 1.2 million active users around 28 countries, and we are translated and localized in 20 different languages. So if you think about Glooko, one of the things that you can consider is we have a footprint around these 28 countries of 7,500 clinics, and Glooko is what they use in their day-to-day workflow to help treat patients, both in the clinic and remotely. We have pretty insane client retention, and that's driven by the fact that the physicians, in almost every case, it's not a prescription per se, but they prescribe their patients to get on Glooko. They say, download the app, synchronize your devices, and then I can see what's going on, even if you're not here in person, and I can help you out. And so that's what drives those retention numbers. And it also drives the outcomes that are very superior. I'll actually dive into those a little bit further. So we like to look at outcomes in not only the industry standard A1C, which is on the left, which is a blood test that is done every, say, 4 to 5 months. But we also like to look at beyond A1C measures. And so those are decreased average blood glucose, time in range, and decreased hyperglycemic events. And the reason why is someone could have a reasonable A1C level, but that is more of a generalized snapshot of what has gone on over the last few months. But they could be having hyper and hypo events throughout that time, and they're not under control. And so because we're collecting data in near real time, we like to measure time in range and items that would ferret out any kind of spikes or other things that might trigger negative health outcomes. Our outcomes are very sustainable. And in fact, we've even tested and done randomized clinical trials on what happens when people go off of Glooko. So we're testing the negative, so to speak. And in fact, when that occurs, when people do go off of Glooko, their outcomes deteriorate rapidly. So we're proving it from a positive and from the negative perspective. We'd be happy to share any of our clinical research with the group. So to get your head around the different types of devices and different data that we're collecting, both in diabetes, but as you see on the right, more in the exercise, weight, blood pressure. Here's a good snapshot, whether it comes from, on the far left, CGMs and BGMs, which measure the blood glucose levels, sometimes every 5 minutes. And we partner with all the folks in that space, to insulin data, whether it's an insulin pump that attaches to your hip, or these new smart insulin pens, which we're pushing into, or even a food database. You can, in Glooko, you can say, I ate a cheeseburger for lunch, and it'll record your activity using natural language processing. Or if you're in Germany, you can say, schnitzel, for instance, and it'll log it. You can also use the barcode scanner. And of course, because our approach is to always try to connect the patient and the doctor and remove any friction, we then take all of these data and the analytics on top of it, and we integrate it into the health system's EMR system so that they have that one patient record, which is very important. And the final thing I'll share with you is, over the last, I'd say, 18 months, Glooko has become not just a great integration tool for the content, a great way to automate and facilitate workflow, but in many countries, it's also become a revenue generator. Different countries, especially as COVID-19 developed, have adopted and or accelerated reimbursement for, in the US case, remote patient monitoring solutions, or in the case of Germany, digital health. France has a digital health program. Belgium has a program. Taiwan has a program. And I think what is happening is payers, and payers can be the government, ex-US, everyone's realizing, including the CMS, that you'd much rather pay every month a smaller amount, say $160 per patient per month, in order to keep a patient in range, under control, using these digital therapeutics, versus paying for a $20,000 emergency room visit. That's obviously not good for the payer. And so what's occurred is the CMS, and you see some of the RPM codes here and what can be reimbursed, has refined and clarified the codes for both remote patient monitoring and chronic care management, CCM, and Glooko as a platform qualifies for these reimbursements. In the US case, because all billing goes through the providers can stand to make a very high incremental revenue because they bill for the whole $160. Glooko takes a portion of that billing. And importantly, the current standard of care for a person with diabetes or these other chronic conditions is to see the physician 3, maybe 4 times a year. That's what's depicted on the right. And during those visits, they bill for an E&M code. But the other 9 months, they don't bill for anything unless the patient is on a remote patient monitoring or chronic care management program with the physician. So it opens up the other 9 months of the year for incremental billing, incremental revenue for the health system and the provider. So this reimbursement dynamic is really helping to propel Glooko's growth. And that's a key area that we're leaning into. So with that, I'll pause on the overview, and happy to field questions from Raul and the rest of the group. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just a reminder, anyone, feel free to send in as many questions as you'd like through the Q&A function on the screen, but I'm happy to kick it off while we still pull in some of these questions. I guess taking it a step back, we've seen the diabetes treatment landscape evolve to a more device-based approach over the last few years, with, real expansion in pumps, connected pens, continuous glucose monitors. And, I think it's reasonable to believe that trend will only continue. So maybe, could you speak to the role that Glooko plays in this evolving digital diabetes management ecosystem? I guess, ultimately, who can benefit from accessing the data and analytics that your platform provides?
Yeah, well, I think you're definitely right that as treatment patterns from a device and pharmaceutical standpoint have evolved, it's only actually complicated matters. If you think about all the CGMs, BGMs, pumps, pens, syringes, there's so many different options for treating the condition, and it varies depending on not only whether you're type 1 or type 2, but also the severity. And so Glooko's position has always been to try to integrate every single device possible, and importantly, create analytics that are dependent on multiple devices. So for instance, a type 1 person with diabetes will very frequently have a CGM from, say, a Dexcom, a insulin pump from Insulet, for instance, and they might have a companion pen, insulin pen. And not only are all 3 of these necessary for their own personal treatment, but each is creating data points. And in order to actually close the loop, which they call it in the industry, just integrating all those different data points into one place is step 1, but then putting analytics and machine learning on top of that to help inform the treatment decisions that not only the physician makes, but the adjustments the patient makes every day of their life is very important. That's a very different dynamic than, say, a lifestyle type 2 who's really trying to cut down on carbs and maybe checks their blood sugar 2-3 times a day. And so what Glooko does is we seek to serve all of those segments of the population, even to pre-diabetes, and then bring all the content together. To the second part of your question, Raul, once that occurs, we're not only helping the physician and the patient, but then we can provide the data of the real world data of what's actually going on in treatment patterns in the real world back to the pharmaceutical and device companies so that they can refine their solutions. They can create new analytics for their closed loops, et cetera, et cetera. So we're helping the patient and the physician make better treatment decisions, but then we're also feeding that insight back to the companies, the life sciences companies, so they can do clinical research, make a better solution, make a better interface with the patient, et cetera.
Got it. No, that's interesting. And I guess given the breadth of use cases that you guys have with this platform, maybe try and help us understand, who are your competitors? How are you guys differentiated from the rest of the market? I guess what makes it so that everyone in the diabetes space needs to partner or should partner with Glooko?
Yeah, I think our key differentiators, our competitive set kind of varies depending on which geographic market we're in and also which segment we're in. And when I say segment, I mean providers or payers, employers, or life sciences companies. But the core differentiation comes from two key areas. One is just the simple fact that we have this global footprint of 7,500 clinics and all the patients in those clinics. So if a pharma company would want to launch a new product into the diabetes market, or a device company would want to do the same, we offer them a accelerated approach and access to all these endocrinology, PCP, cardiology clinics. So that's a differentiator. There's no one else who really has that global footprint. We have niche competitors in different geographies, but certainly no one is across 28 countries at the scale we are. Now, on the flip side, the providers using in those clinics, those health systems, they want to partner with us because we integrate with almost every single medical device and pharmaceutical product there is. So it kind of feeds each other. It's a bit of a flywheel effect because the life sciences companies want access to the patients in the clinics. The clinics and the patients want access to all the devices so that they have freedom of choice. And the physicians obviously want one portal to log into instead of 200 different websites or portals to see all their patients' data. A typical endocrinology clinic could have anywhere from 1,000 to 4,000 patients. So imagine across that breadth, you have, say, those patients have, say, 250 devices. I can't imagine the time issues that would cause of logging into every single manufacturer's portal versus having it consolidated in one view. And that's what Glooko provides.
Got it. I know you touched on Glooko's efforts to expand into other chronic conditions. Maybe help us understand the strategy behind there, and also how you plan on leveraging the commercial inroads that you've made in the diabetes space to drive rapid adoption in some of these other conditions as well.
Yep, sure. So as many of you may have read and know, we recently closed our Series D financing round, and a big push of that Series D was to go further into other chronic conditions that are comorbid to diabetes. We have already begun doing that, as I shared, by integrating connected blood pressure cuffs, weight scales like the Withings, tapping into Apple Health, Google Fit, those type of platforms, and even the food and exercise tracker that I had mentioned earlier. So the strategy there is somewhat obvious in that cardiometabolic diseases are very holistic. You need to view the conditions from different perspectives, not just the person with diabetes perspective, because that person, as many of you know, the number one killer of persons with diabetes is actually heart disease. So if you really want to do right by the person with diabetes, you also need to have solutions from a hypertension cardiology standpoint. The other element of it is, to be frank, many of our customers around the world have said for years, I want Glooko, but I want it for heart conditions as well. So can you make a Glooko for heart disease? And so we're responding to the market and the asks there.
Got it. I guess going off of that, you had also touched on, industry partners and how a lot of this data can be used to help drive, their insights and direct their clinical efforts. Maybe expand on the symbiotic relationship that exists there and provide an example of one or two partnerships that you're particularly excited about to help us better understand how that collaboration, drives added value.
Yeah, sure. So what's interesting is if you're collecting every 5 minutes across all these patients around the entire world, all these data, you have access to a massive real-world data repository. And what was interesting to me, having a background in data and analytics in healthcare, is the granularity of the data that Glooko collects is light years more granular than, say, a medical claim. So a medical claim will say, this patient has a ICD-10 code of either type 1 or type 2 diabetes. And that's it. That's what you know from a medical claim. And maybe, what the service was that the person went in for. With the Glooko data, their A1C level, what their blood glucose reading was 5 minutes ago. How many milligrams of insulin was injected at what time, and it in relation to each other. So it's just so far more granular. And so what that enables are clinical researchers to either, one, use all that historic real world data to do analyses, or two, where we're pushing further and further is doing prospective clinical research for both pharma device, but also the CRO companies. So because we have this network of 7,500 clinics, they will contract with us to run their trial on Glooko. And Glooko is unique in the space in that it is FDA Part 11 compliant, which is a designation that the FDA uses as a kind of a better homes and gardens stamp of approval for running clinical trials on a platform. And Glooko has that designation. So we're starting to get more and more, and this has been over, I'd say, the last 2 years, into the clinical research space, using our data on one hand, but also the platform to collect prospective data. And so to the second part of your question, we're actively engaging with all the top CROs, and they're leveraging us as part of their solution that they put together for the life sciences companies. And then we're also engaging directly with life sciences companies and even helping them build their own custom digital therapeutics, which I know is a very hot space that many people are looking at. So that part of our business is rapidly growing, and we're very excited about it because we're able to leverage our footprint and our data to help inform those decisions and potentially even shrink the clinical research timelines.
Got it. No, that's very impressive. I think, just with the last couple minutes, let's take a step back here. You guys are having incredible success in getting into new clinics, helping physicians, getting new patients on board. You're working with industry partners. You're now working with CROs, and you're expanding into cardiometabolic conditions. There's so much going on here. As you look to the next 12 to 18 months, what are Glooko's biggest priorities? How should we think about benchmarking Glooko's progress?
Yeah, I think, that push and expansion into new geographies, into the comorbid conditions, and not only building out the device and data integrations, but then the analytics and that value add on top of it. I think you'll be seeing quite a few moves there, as well as expansions of marketplace, whether that be geographic or more into the payer employer market. So I think what you'll see is a more expansive Glooko, and able to serve more of the customers in the ways that they have been asking us for to do more, to help them be, as we say, better together with their patients and cover more of the marketplace. And if you look at, the ratios of people, you'd say globally about 1 in 9 people have diabetes. About half of the people have either or obesity, diabetes, or some sort of cardiovascular condition. So we'll be able to serve a much broader TAM with the direction we're going, and help put together all the pieces for the physicians to make informed decisions.
Got it. No, I appreciate that color, and really excited to see the continued progress that you guys make over the next year or two. But unfortunately, I do think that that's all the time that we have today. Zach, I really want to thank you for joining us, for walking us through the story, and for telling us, about everything that Glooko has going on. For everyone in the audience, thank you for tuning in. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the symposium and has a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Raul. Take care.
Yeah.